Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today, I've got the new issue of the relaunched Heavy Metal. So this is Heavy Metal #1. I know Heavy Metal closed down and got shuttered. They've come back now. This was through a Kickstarter. I don't remember if I got a year subscription or if it was just this one issue. I'll also be doing a review of the new Metal Hurlant #1. They're kind of both relaunching through Kickstarter at the same time. In English language, which is kind of interesting because they're kind of the same magazine, but kind of competing magazines at this point, and with similar approach. So I got them both. I think I got a subscription to one and not the other. I don't know. I don't remember. But looking through them both has been really interesting. This one, obviously, you can see I got with the Frazetta cover on it, which is a little bit old school, but they have some new school stuff. I think both of these magazines are, I don't know if it's just for the first issues or if it's something that's going to be continuing through them, but it seems like they're mixing up some old stuff with some new stuff. The Heavy Metal issue seems to have more new stuff, but they're also celebrating the history of, what these two establishments within the industry have done over the years for science fiction. So there's a bit of celebration of the magazines in these, which is totally appropriate for a relaunch. So I'm not sure how they're going to handle that going forward, if it just is all new stories or not. But we'll take a look like I do with any anthology, just kind of show you one spread from each artist and give you an idea what's in here. I don't know how much of this is all new content or not. I think this is a new story by Anki Bilal. Always cool. Anki Bilal is one of the OGs of heavy metal, so always cool to see some new Anki Bilal. Personally, I miss the old pen and ink Moebius style stuff. I don't think it's bad work. I really like Anki Bilal's new kind of pastel, mixed media style that he's been using forever. But I'm a really big fan of that old heavy metal style, so I'm always wanting to see that. But yeah, Anki Bilal, I think, is probably one of the biggest staples, so it's cool to see, I think, new Anki Bilal work. This is kind of like a space vampire story. But if you're familiar with Anki Bilal's other stuff, it feels very much in line with that aesthetically. An artist I've never heard of that really blew me away in this issue was Vicente Sigrelis. It looks like it's totally hand painted, maybe in oil, maybe in acrylic. Definitely doesn't look digital, but really, really rich, especially world building. The figures are good as well, but I think the creatures and the world building in this is, just the visual world building and the coloration and stuff like that's really, really beautiful throughout this. So hopefully this is an artist we'll see a lot more from in heavy metal. As I went through this, there definitely a back and forth, and I guess this has always been the case with heavy metal, but you tend to have this bias for the nostalgia of the old ones, and kind of oh, it's not as good as it used to be. But there would definitely be stories like this where I'm oh yeah, I'm in. This new run of heavy metal is awesome. And then there's other stories like this one by Craig Wilson, where it's still good work, but it just feels so modern. It's got the digital coloring and stuff like that, which I really feel took away some of what was special about heavy metal, at least in my mind, is a lot of that really hand-done, hand-painted work just kind of has a different feel and vibe to it versus these more modern-looking stuff. And especially with the short stories, short sci-fi stories, I feel like going all the way back to the old EC books, we've kind of covered everything that a horror and a sci-fi could cover. It feels like the original heavy metal and Metal Hurlant, it pushed the boundaries of that, and they maybe haven't been pushed terribly far since then. And so you're still getting stuff like this that would have fit in perfectly well in the 70s and 80s, but at least it's got that really awesome hand-done quality to it. Versus this computer stuff, it's hard for me to even read because there's in the 8 pages or whatever, there has to be a lot of captions usually to explain it, and the art just feels kind of homogenized to me. It doesn't have the particular style of a particular artist's hand because it's filtered through the computer. So I was vacillating as I was reading this, like, how much is it worth it to continue getting new issues of this? And it just depends on which story I'm reading, how I feel about that. Then we've got some heavy metal OGs. I don't know if this is new work or old work, but we have a John Workman piece here. Even this, just in black and white, kind of letting the black and white speak for itself, brings me back into the mode of like, yeah, I'm looking at a heavy metal. And then we jump over to a Burton and Side piece. Again, I don't know if this is a new one that Ortiz and Segura did for the relaunch, or if they're reprinting an old one. It looks pretty fresh to me, but I don't know. Stylistically, this is what I'm familiar with. The colors look a little bit brighter than normal, but just seeing this hand-painted art, kind of that old Moebius line with the hatching, it just feels like heavy metal to me. These are classic heavy metal characters, so really excited to see them. I'm hoping this is new stuff, but I'm not enough of a fanatic to know whether there's anything being reprinted in this or not. Then we have a piece by Steve Magnon called Evil Sex Bitch. This very much has the old school heavy metal vibes to it, like pen and ink with the watercolor painted. One of the other things that I'm having to grapple with looking at these new ones is, even though the art style feels, yeah, there's what I want out of heavy metal, it's hard in my 40s in 2025 to be really excited about a strip called Evil Sex Bitch, where you've got like a girl with her tits out and a leather thong, like running around burning guys' heads. So there's like that content divide of like, this is the old content and the old style is like what I want to see when I look at heavy metal. But then like the actually what's going on narrative wise from the old heavy metals, I'm not too interested in anymore. So it's a weird mix of like, what do I do with this? Or I feel like some of the newer artists are avoiding some of the more like rapey cliches of heavy metal, but the art's not speaking to me. So I'm really kind of unsure about my reaction to this overall. Then we've got what looks like it's going to be an ongoing story by Leah Moore, Alan Moore's daughter, and her partner John Repion. I know they've done a bunch of books together. And this is being illustrated by Anna Morozova. They're taking the Tarna figure from the original heavy metal cover and doing a story about that. This one, to me, I kind of like the style. There's a bit of almost Michael Allred in here, and then a little bit of like Tula Latoy and Marguerite Sauvage, I believe are the names I'm thinking of. So as far as like contemporary digital art goes, I like it. It looks nice, but it still has that kind of schlocky, plasticky computer rendering to it. And then, I'm just not too interested in like Titty Girl with Sword, but that does look like an ongoing thing in there. Another kind of fun hand-painted one by M.L. Peters, just a one-page thing, just a little joke. And then another piece here called Lester by Fernando Dagnino. This one, even though it's digitally colored, it has this really nice flat coloration to it. It seems a more particular personal style to it, so I enjoyed the look of that one quite a bit. There's a 2-page story here by Dwayne Harris. Very confused about how this one is made. It almost looks like photos were taken and then filters run over them, and I don't know, this one's too strangely computery for me, but it kind of works like in the heavy metal aesthetic in terms of being so experimental with the stylistic approach. But like this right here, this all looks really cool, but then it looks like they collaged in an actual photo of a beard. So just kind of confused about how that one's made. Some of how it looks is cool, and some of how it looks is really schlocky to me. And then we've got a very modern kind of just computer color looking thing by an artist named Karen Grant. So to me, this just isn't what I want out of heavy metal. Not that it's bad work, it feels too homogenized with modern work. This is very old school heavy metal by John Stanisoy. The art's really pretty cool, even though we've got this schlocky computer coloring over top of it. The line work's really nice. It almost feels like Walt Simonson, but gone even crazier, like more berserk with it. A little bit of like older, later Neil Adams type of vibe to it as well. But again, it's like chicks with chain mail and an axe. So, not content-wise, not for me, but art-wise, totally digging it, which is a weird kind of flip-flop throughout this book. The ones where I like the stories more, don't like the art as much. Where I like the art, I'm not into the stories as much. This one here, written by Michael Conrad, drawn by Ilias Kyriazis. Kyriazis. I'm gonna totally butcher the name on that. This one I actually really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the art, and a really cool design on this character where he's got a mask with this gigantic stone that's holding him down at the end of it. This is definitely more modern, but again, it's someone who, even though they're using computer coloring and stuff, has a much more particular style where they're really doing all of the shading work with this like noise tone that they're putting in there, or maybe they're working on like a duo shade paper that has a pattern. It's kind of like that noise pattern that you get in Howard Chaykin's American flag stuff. Do that with some tones and whatnot, and then flat colors over top of it. It's a really nice look, and yeah, just a really cool character design. So this is something, hopefully maybe that one would continue on. As we got later into the book, there were some stories that looked more like they were going to continue on, and that also got me excited for future issues of this. And then there's another short Tarna piece. This one's by Joseph Michael Linzer. I've always kind of liked Linzer's art. I mean, it's better when he's doing just like the straight pinup stuff. Once it gets into the narrative stuff, I think some of the figure work gets a little too like you've studied anatomy, but it's a little stiff. They look a little constructed. And then obviously always better with the female characters. The male characters look a little bit more stiff, but a lot of really nice rendering and cool imagery throughout. I remember, seeing Dawn, I think it was Dawn, always liking Linzer's work, but I don't think I've ever really read anything. So it's cool to finally have like one that I've read through. I think this artist, Janevsky's one of the ones, if not the one, that stood out most to me as someone who's doing something new, but still has the vibe of the old heavy metal. And part of it is just because they took the time to like take the black and white line art and turn it into a color and then pick a really particular color scheme. So instead of just like I've got all the tools in the coloring crayon box, digital, doorknob coloring that some of these have, it's again a very particular style. It's prepared particularly for print to look a certain way on the page. It's not just taken, I drew in black and white, so there's going to be black lines in there. But it has like a sci-fi feel. It has a lot of the crosshatchy stuff. So there's a lot of very old school heavy metal feel to it, but then it feels new and modern. And that's kind of what I was hoping for in both Metal Hurlant and the new heavy metal, is that you're finding new artists who carry on the spirit. Like to me, Brandon Graham and what he did with Island, Brandon, I love him. He's a great friend, but I've always, before I even knew him, I loved his art, and I always considered Brandon like someone who has the true spirit of heavy metal without being too much of a copycat. And I really feel like this Janevsky is, again, someone who's got the spirit of heavy metal, got the influence there, but has evolved it into something new. And this is the kind of work that excites me and will make me want to keep coming back. I don't necessarily want to just see all the old hits. I want to see people doing new things. Very cool, kind of startling because it's out of the typical style of heavy metal, but they've got a Jim Rugg UFO piece here. Yeah, it's weird because it's not the typical sci-fi thing. This is a more real world story of UFOs, the type of thing that you would find in Jim's self-published books, where he's doing these UFO stories in Philadelphia. Always excited to see Jim Rugg stuff. And this one's pretty cool. I think he did hand coloring on this, probably with the blue line method, and gouache is kind of what it looks like. So really cool to see Jim continuing to play with all of these techniques that they were always sharing on Cartoonist Kayfabe. Yeah, and just, because kayfabe's no longer going, you just don't get your daily Jim Rugg, so it's nice to get some Jim Rugg. And cool that Heavy Metal's expanding like what they consider sci-fi and what they're including in the magazine. And then a piece by John Wayshak. John Wayshak's someone I remember being exposed to way back. I think he came from the Bay Area. I don't know. People, when I was like 2005, 6, 7 in the Bay Area going to school at Berkeley, I got introduced to Wayshak stuff. Maybe it's someone who was just a fan of his work online, I'm not sure. But someone I just saw as an illustrator. It's cool to start seeing in comics format. And of course, as an ink slinger myself, I just love all this. This is another one that feels properly like a modern version of the old heavy metal stuff. It's not too copy, but you can see that it's in the lineage. So with artists like this being part of it, I'm definitely going to be like, oh yeah, there's enough of this cool stuff in here that I can overlook the computer generated stuff. I shouldn't say computer generated, I should say computer color. There's no AI stuff in here. And then another one that was really surprising to me is Tim Vigil. There's a Tim Vigil piece in here, and I don't really know Tim Vigil's work other than knowing that it's Faust. I never read any of that stuff, but I know it's very popular. I know the kayfabe guys blew that kind of underground cartooning back up. What did they call it? Outlaw cartooning, and Tim Vigil was like at the forefront of that. So cool to see Tim Vigil in heavy metal. Given what heavy metal kind of allows in terms of tits and gore and all of that, and given what I know about Tim Vigil's work, it's a surprisingly very tame story, but with some beautiful imagery in it. Very kind of see the Neil Adams influence, a little bit of like Bernie Wrightson influence going on in there. So yeah, really cool. Interesting to see him in color. The computer colors are done well. It's not really schlocky. So that's one that I think a lot of people that, you know, I know pretty much everyone who watches this channel came over from kayfabe or was a fan of kayfabe. So for a lot of you who are Tim Vigil fans, even just to get this would really be worth it. Probably the thing that surprised me and excited me the most and makes me want to get further issues of this is there's a Valentina story in here, but not by Guido Crepa. This is by Sergio Garassi. Obviously, Guido Crepa is no longer with us. The Valentina stuff's coming out from Fantagraphics and the big... Actually, all of his stuff is coming out. It's mostly been Valentina stuff. This artist doesn't draw exactly like Crepa, but as soon as I was flipping casually through the magazine, I thought, oh, look, they have a Valentina story in here. It doesn't quite look right, but it's definitely Valentina. And I'm seeing all of like the layouts that you would expect. I'm seeing the use of the dots for the memory panels. Someone who has, and then the quality of the line work, even though I would say the structural stuff, the Sergio Gerassi's like a much better, more... better in terms of like really accurate anatomy, much better at drawing men than Crepa was. There's not all of the distortions of the figures that you would get with Crepa, but everything else is there. And it really has the vibe and feel, and it's obviously someone who respects those Valentina stories, respects a lot of the meta play, a lot of the formal play, the compositional play, and someone who really understands Crepa's language. So really, really enjoying that. Really curious to see where the story goes and what other kind of play happens in it. I'm wondering how this is drawn. Some of the marks almost look digital to me, which is strange because there's other parts that feel so physical. But with those tiny little lines that Crepa always use, like it makes sense, those little tiny digital lines too. So really excited about that. Really glad they're doing it in black and white. They're not feeling the need to colorize it or anything. And then really, really like this use on this page of the standard Crepa, like memory scene dots turning into the rain shower head coming down on Valentina there. Really cool page, the type of stuff you would expect in the original strip. So perfect. This story is by Jason Pell and the artist is named Jock. Again, like a more homogenized modern stuff with computer coloring. Great art, fun story about these mechs fighting, but it just doesn't have that like peculiar quality that a lot of heavy metal stuff has. And then in the back, some really awesome old school, going back to having some strips in the back. Really, really excited to see that they've brought back Paul Kirchner's The Bus. I know The Bus #3 as a collection is coming out. Super excited about that. I've met Paul at Mocha one year and we communicate back and forth through DMs on Instagram. Paul's a super nice guy. The Bus was always one of my favorite things in those original heavy metals. I just love obviously the pen and ink crosshatchy style spoke spoke to the younger me who was always about that. And then just the kind of fun, surreal play with reality through imagery and perspective and stuff like that. It's right up my alley. To me, it's one of the like standard heavy metal things. So I love that they got Paul back in doing this. And I love that Paul's back to cartooning. He's got all of his stuff out that you can buy through Cannabis Editions. And I would really encourage it. It's all great stuff. This, the Dope Rider, the Hieronymus and Bosch, Murder by Remote, all of that stuff is great. And then we have stuff here by Kurt Mello, some old like cartoon strip stuff, and then some things by Frank Fort, who is the editor of Heavy Metal. So a lot of good, like really playing back to some of the oldies, but getting them some new stuff. And then you have the cover gallery with all the different covers. There's also some stuff in here where they're celebrating, like they would do, they're celebrating artists. I didn't put a sticky on it, but celebrating Greg Hildebrand and some of those articles that you would get with Heavy Metal, and then just some look back at the madness. Some of these cracked me up because they're celebrating like the tits and dicks part of it, which I think is a bit silly of a thing to be celebrating, but they're celebrating that. There's one in here with Din somewhere, and it's like something about the tagline was like more action than you could swing a dick at or something like that. So there's a bit of trying to be edgy that I think maybe is kind of outdated, but it's heavy metal, so you expect that. Like Serpier. I love I think Serpieri, I don't know how you say his name. Always loved the Druna stuff, the way it looked, but it's so like getting raped by monsters. I don't know, it's hard to be into that in my older age. So for them to be celebrating, that's a little weird. I don't know how much of that to expect going forward, but overall, even though there are some of these things that are a little too slick and modern for me, there's so much of these things where you are getting someone new doing the old vibes, or someone old coming back and doing new things, that I think I'll keep checking out the next heavy metals. We'll see how it goes. There's enough stuff in here that I want to follow up on, so we'll see. Quite enjoyed it. I imagine that I'm more picky about content than most people anyways, so I think anyone who's a fan of the old heavy metal will probably really enjoy this and should get themselves a copy.